Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today's video is the final episode of NBA Trade Machine for the 2019-20 NBA season. Of course, when there are deals going down on trade deadline day or slightly before it, I'll have videos coming out covering those, but in terms of specifically NBA Trade Machine, we're gonna have to wait until the off season before we do any more of these. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day. All right, first up, that kid says that the Pistons would receive Quinn Cook, Kyle Kuzma, and Troy Daniels in exchange for Derrick Rose and Markieff Morris. So this is interesting for me because there's been a lot of Derrick Rose trades in general, but specifically to the Lakers, trying to get them another on-ball playmaker. And Kyle Kuzma stuff has been pretty well thrown around as well, with the Lakers potentially moving him for another piece to help them win a championship this season, because he's kind of the only trade piece that they have left, and his fit with this team is certainly questionable. And obviously there are the aspects of the Derrick Rose thing and the Kyle Kuzma thing, but the other interesting part for me is that they're also getting Markieff Morris here, who's another guy that could help this Lakers rotation. And ideally what they'd be getting out of any deal would be obviously getting better players, but also depth, which I think this trade definitely helps them with. Let's go first from the Pistons perspective. They're receiving Quinn Cook, who could be a good player down the road. He's a solid shooter, but that's about it. This is a minimum salary guy from this offseason, so it doesn't have huge value. Troy Daniels, another minimum salary guy that can shoot. These are two shooters that are both still fairly young that they could retain long-term, but essentially the value here is getting Kyle Kuzma in exchange. Now, there are reports that came out earlier before I recorded this video essentially saying that the Pistons are looking for like a lottery level first-round pick in exchange for Derrick Rose. I don't think that's actually true. There's no way that that's their expectation. A first-round pick in general would make sense, but not a lottery level one by any means, even for the most desperate of teams around the league. And they're giving up, Derrick Rose is a guy that's on a good contract this year and next. They wouldn't necessarily be in a rush to trade him, with the exception of the fact that his value is probably never going to be higher than it is right now in terms of his play on the court. In terms of his contract, this is a really good time to trade Derrick Rose for a team in Detroit that definitely needs future value. And then Markieff Morris, I don't really have an issue with them throwing him into this deal either. I don't think he has a ton of value as an individual, but this could sweeten the pot potentially for LA, or get them to throw in like some second-round picks or something for Detroit. And again, getting any kind of future value is a good thing. So for Detroit, depending on how they value Kyle Kuzma, how good they think he could be for them long-term, I think it makes sense for them to make a move similar to this if there aren't any better Derrick Rose moves out there. For LA, it's pretty simple. Derrick Rose is a really good playmaker, someone that might struggle a little bit off the ball in more LeBron, Anthony Davis-centric lineups, but if you prioritize putting him out there when LeBron's not out there as a playmaker along with AD, I think this is a player that could definitely help the Lakers a ton. Obviously not defensively, but someone that can score the ball for them. And then Morris just provides them a little bit of versatility in the front court, someone that has been on a bit of a downhill trend over the last few seasons, but I still think provides value. And again, most importantly for the Lakers, depth, and kind of replaces that Kyle Kuzma spot in the rotation. So I think this is a better trade for the Lakers than the Pistons, but given the Pistons situation, if there isn't any better value out there for them for Derrick Rose, this would be a trade that would make sense. Next up now is a really interesting one from Dan. He says that the Cavaliers would receive Tyler Johnson and Cameron Johnson in exchange for Kevin Love. And we've kind of calmed down on all of the Kevin Love trade talk. There was a lot of it initially, and then they had even more issues with Kevin Love, with him kind of throwing temper tantrums on the court. And then everything's kind of calmed down. And I think part of that is because they found it really difficult to find trade partners for a guy that is as advanced in his age as Kevin Love, with as many years and the high dollar value left on his contract. There just probably weren't a lot of suitors for someone like that, considering the climate of the league at the moment, not having a ton of salary cap space and things like that. But the Suns, however, are in a uniquely viable position to bring in someone like Kevin Love, because they have assets, whether it be Mikal Bridges or Cameron Johnson, that would certainly interest the Cavaliers, but aren't necessarily hugely critical pieces for them down the road. And they have the big expiring contract in Tyler Johnson that allows the Cavs to immediately get out from under Love's salary, which is a pretty ideal deal here for Cleveland. The issue is, in terms of the other teams that could potentially be trading for Love, the other team to keep in mind is obviously Portland. They have their own luxury tax issues though to account for, and that could definitely hinder them down the road if they trade, for example, Whiteside and a young guy in exchange for Love. Long term, the luxury tax is going to be more of an issue for them than it is going to be for Phoenix, which is why it makes a little bit more sense for them, and why I think this is a 100% viable trade. I wouldn't be surprised at all if either on trade deadline day or the day before, this is a move that is actually made. From a financial standpoint, from an asset exchange standpoint, from the context of both of these teams, it 1000% makes sense. The only question mark here is if Either Cleveland thinks they can get more value for Love down the road once more years and money comes off of his deal, or the Suns are looking at this and saying, yeah, we don't want to trade away Cameron Johnson for a guy that's going to be expensive and older just to make a playoff push. That's really the only jump in logic that we're making here, is that the Suns are willing to invest Cameron Johnson or Mikal Bridges along with a big expiring contract in exchange for someone like Kevin Love just to help them get the 7th or 8th seed. Now, this is a franchise that has been desperate to get to the postseason for a while, and Love would be a really good fit for them. So it would make sense on paper. It's just whether or not they would actually want to pull the trigger. Next up now, Mystery says that the Bucks would receive Robert Covington in exchange for Ersan Ilyasova and DJ Wilson. He also says that the Bucks would include Indiana's 1st and 2nd this year. Now, first when I read this, I thought that there's no reason Minnesota is going to accept this deal, but when you read at the top that they're also going to be receiving picks as well, then it makes a lot more sense. I would also encourage you guys in the future to use NBATradeMachine.com as opposed to ESPN Trade Machine, because they actually allow you to add picks and generally is a little bit more accurate as well in terms of salaries and things like that. But with that said, I like this deal, honestly, for both sides, because there's this weird thing that's been happening with Robert Covington where, like, I definitely think he's a really good player, and the fact that he's on a contract for the next couple of seasons, he's kind of locked in, is definitely helpful, especially for a team like Milwaukee that isn't going to have a ton of moving parts after this season in terms of their salaries and things like that. Having someone that's cost controlled for the next few years definitely helps. He's someone that helps a contender as a 3-and-D player, which is exactly what a lot of teams are looking for, right? But this guy's definitely being overvalued, Robert Covington is. Like, again, love him as a player, but you're not going to be getting like multiple first-round picks and young players for this kind of guy. So if you're looking at this strictly from Milwaukee, I think they're giving up fair value, and I think that Minnesota is receiving fair value in exchange for Covington. For Milwaukee, the fit for Covington is pretty clear. Another good wing defender, which surprisingly they actually do need on this roster. They've got a lot of guys that are like 6'4" and 6'5" and under, but then other than that, in terms of on the perimeter, but then other than that, like you've got Chris Middleton and Giannis, and just having another good defender and three-point shooter definitely would help. And they're not giving up really anything out of their current rotation. Ilyasova plays some, Wilson plays some, and then you're giving up the Indiana first that you got from Malcolm Brogdon. But in general, this really strengthens their team this year without really, taking out much in terms of their rotation. Again, for Minnesota, I honestly think that Robert Covington's value is never going to be higher than it is right now. And if you're getting DJ Wilson, who I think could potentially be something down the road, Ilyasova, whose contract will run out next offseason and won't really matter too much to your team, could potentially flip him next year, and you're getting an extra first and an extra second, I think it's something to consider, even though, the Timberwolves are in a really tough spot right now with Karl-Anthony Towns not being super happy. But that's a situation they put themselves in. They can't just continue to hold on to an asset in Covington just because, they don't want to accept that they are in a really bad spot. So in general, asset-wise, in terms of the picks and the players received, I think this is a fair trade for both sides. I think this would really help Milwaukee, and I'd like to see this one happen. Moving on now, Coyote says that the Clippers would receive Andre Iguodala in exchange for Mo Harkless, Jerome Robinson, and a second-round pick. Now, this one is here kind of as a placeholder to have a discussion about Andre Iguodala. It's not necessarily about the trade itself, although I think this is actually a little bit too much value for the Clippers to be giving up. I'm not sure that Iguodala is going to be able to stay fully healthy down the road. I think Harkless is at least a solid player, can defend, can shoot a little bit, and I still believe in the potential of Jerome Robinson down the road as a player or just as a trade asset as well. This is more so about what exactly is going to happen with Andre Iguodala, because I think it's pretty clear that he's going to get traded. Even if it comes down to it, and Memphis was like, okay, 1 second-round pick, sure, you can have him. Like, they're going to get value out of this guy. They're not just going to buy him out. And it kind of seems like deals like this and with the Mavericks potentially is kind of their backup plan. And if someone steps up and says, here, have our first-round pick, we want Andre Iguodala, they're going to make that move. But right now it seems like these are the kind of deals that are out there in terms of like an okay young player, a salary to match the expiring, and then a second-round pick. Once they get that first-round pick offer, which I think eventually they will, that's going to be the move that they'll make. So this is more so a placeholder to just have a conversation about Andre Iguodala in general. I do think he's going to get moved. I think they'll get a first-round pick for him. It just depends on where from. And then last up now, Neon says that the Suns would receive Derrick Rose in exchange for Mikal Bridges, Javon Carter, and a 2021 pick, which I'm assuming has protections on it. And there's actually a lot of really good Suns trades this week that I just didn't choose to cover in this video because I didn't want it to be like a whole Suns trade machine video. And on the surface, maybe you're thinking this doesn't really make any sense. I mean, the Suns are giving up Mikal Bridges, who could be, pretty good down the road as like a 3-and-D guy. Javon Carter is a good defender, maybe like a Pat Bev light down the road potentially, and a first-round pick, which I don't agree with here. I mean, if they want to throw in 2 seconds, maybe, but there's no way the Suns are going to be giving up a first-round pick, regardless of the protections, in my opinion, given their track record of being really, really bad over the last 4 or so seasons. But I really think that Phoenix is going to explore trades like this in terms of trying to get them into the postseason this year, because that would just be such a huge momentum thing for them to at least, get the 7th or 8th seed and see what the postseason is like for guys like Devin Booker and things like that. Even if they get demolished by one of the LA teams in the first round, I think it would be really important. I think that's definitely something that they are going to potentially prioritize by bringing in veterans like Rose. The fit alongside Rubio isn't ideal, but you can start to get a little funky with 3-guard lineups with Rubio and Rose and Booker, kind of like Oklahoma City has done with Chris Paul and Dennis Schroeder and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And again, just a little bit more scoring punch for this team. And they're giving up, assuming you're getting rid of the first-round pick, like you're really not giving up a ton here. Mikal Bridges, Javon Carter, Bridges and Cameron Johnson are kind of in the same boat right now, as could be good down the road, but not necessarily showing a ton, just like what we talked about with that Kevin Love deal earlier. So I'm okay giving him up here in exchange for someone like Derrick Rose. Again, if my priority is to try and make the postseason this year. If that's not my priority, then I'm hanging on to obviously my pick, but also Javon Carter, Mikal Bridges, guys that could be something down the road. And I'm not too worried about bringing in a veteran like Rose. But as I said earlier, I do think that they're going to try and make a postseason push. And if we're going to see a Suns trade, it's probably going to be something similar to this or the Love trade that we covered earlier. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. And I thank you guys for an awesome season of NBA Trade Machine. We'll pick it back up in the off season. And yeah, I'll see you all next time.